We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence.
De lo que estoy más orgulloso de esos 6 años es del año de 1968.
La historia es nuestra y la hace los pueblos.
There's many ways of promoting peace. Do everything for peace. Kiss for peace or smile for peace.
So geht es zum Bruch und nichts anderes.
Unir nuestras luchas no para cambiar un gobierno, sino para derrocarlo.
La policía está utilizando gases lacrimógenos contra el grupo de manifestantes.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
La policía ha vuelto a mostrar su peor cara.
¡Tenemos memoria!
Nosotros actuamos por indicación siempre política.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Bienvenidas y bienvenidos a este espacio de diálogos con la realidad. El día de hoy vamos a tener una conversación con Kristinn Hrafnsson, el vocero de Wikileaks. Kristinn, hello, thank you very much for accepting this interview with us.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Kristinn, I guess the world, we can say nowadays that there is a pre-Wikileaks and a post-Wikileaks in the world today. How do you see the role of Wikileaks in the society that we live in today?
Well, I totally agree with you that Wikileaks was introducing something very revolutionary into the world. And I believe that we will not see that until in the future, when we look back. When you're in the midst of big social changes, you have a hard time identifying the core issues. We're in the midst of the little storm, or in a little bit of fogginess, but you are seeing the essence and elements of what we stand for and what we have contributed, and you can sort of forward look on the basis of that. I believe that the big excitement that people saw in Wikileaks was somewhat a reflection of what has happened in the world after 9/11. A negative change in the world, where secrecy has become bigger and bigger, and the attack on privacy and on human rights in the Western world, especially, of course, in the US, has been increasing. So there was the right time for Wikileaks in 2010, with the big and sort of explosive revelations that we were presenting at that time, on the Iraq war, the Afghan war, and of course then the diplomatic cables, which were pertaining to matters all over the world. These elements were basically the need for people to get the truth, which they had not been getting. We of course were exposing the wrongdoing and war crimes, but in a way we were also exposing that the mainstream media had absolutely not been doing their job. If the mainstream media had been able to do their job and had been willing to do their job and do actually what journalism is about, there had been no need for Wikileaks. And there had been no war in Iraq in 2003. So that is the importance of what Wikileaks contributed in 2010, and has sort of been created a path that has led to exciting new things.
I think one of the many contributions of WikiLeaks has actually been this point that you're raising, which is the challenge to the mainstream media and to actually make evident and obvious that they are not doing their work right.
Yep.
But then the work of WikiLeaks became more known once the cable gates, the cables were actually given to the press, in particular papers in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
Why WikiLeaks chose that strategy in those media?
Well, we chose that strategy because there was a need to get the word out. I mean, we have a commitment to our sources, a commitment to maximize impact, to get as much impact out of the material as possible. And we saw from, for example, the first release of the Collateral Murder video, where we did not team up with the mainstream media, but just presented online, and we were hoping that the mainstream media would pick it up and actually get involved in the real story, what this was being exposed, which was war crimes and killing of innocent civilians, and among them 2 Reuters journalists in Baghdad. That did not happen. There was the mainstream media failed in sort of picking up the true story. They were too much focused on the celebrity issue of Julian Assange, or who leaked, instead of what was there. So we decided we have to find a new way and actually try to find good elements in the mainstream media where you can find excellent journalists. I mean, they're not all bad. And there are, in the end, we were teaming up with more than 100 organizations or individuals all around the world in getting the information out. And it worked well. And maybe if we want to be a little bit arrogant, we were also a little bit educating these elements in what could be done. And in many ways we have now created a huge network that can be used to direct other leaks and other information all over the world. So it worked well. It was a learning experience for us along the way. It was a learning experience for the media involved, who had to adapt to our demands for secure communication and encryption, and a special way of dealing with the material in an honest manner that we had committed to use towards our sources. There were ups and downs. Some of the media that we worked with did not like working what we demanded, and the relationship soured on some fronts. They did not honor their commitment to us in one way. Even the New York Times basically went behind our backs, and even the former editor of the New York Times has been proudly saying on record that he violated a clear terms of agreement with us. He went to the government with unpublished stories and said, "Here they are. Look, presented to the Pentagon, the White House. That's what we got. We're going to publish it. Do you have any objections?" And they actually pulled stories, because this is totally unacceptable. And who would have thought that this grand bastion of quality journalism that everybody thought was the greatest in the world, who was not afraid to take on the U.S. president in the early 70s through the Pentagon Papers publishing, and would 40 years later show such ridiculous cowardice and subservient to those in power. That was a great disappointment, and for me personally, as somebody who actually way back thought that New York Times was such a great and courageous newspaper that would take on corrupt powers.
I have spoken with several academics, and I have spoken with journalists who actually say or recognize that journalism itself, the practice of journalism, was shaken up also by the leaks of WikiLeaks and the forcing of reporters and journalists to deal with this information. How do you as a reporter see this? Has it actually changed some of the practice of journalists?
Absolutely. I think there has been of course there are some people who are as old as I am or older that just cannot cope with this new reality. I mean, they cannot cope with seeing this as an expansion and a new and expanded boundary of journalism. But others have embraced it and see the possibility there. There have even been attempts in the mainstream media to open up sort of a gateway for whistleblowers or leakers to get information. Some have been rather pathetic, but there has been an attempt. They understand that this is a concept that is here to stay, and they have to respond in some manner. They've had to learn as well the hard way that there is a big need for security and communication, which is an extremely important thing. And even when we were saying that after 2010, no, there has to be encryption, there has to be very secure communication. Some journalists were saying, "Oh no, this is sheer paranoia." But now with Edward Snowden, we know exactly that, as the joke goes, even if you're paranoid, doesn't mean that they're not after you. They are after you. They are collecting the information. So I mean, in many ways, journalists are seeing that there's a new angle there, and they will have to train themselves in dealing with that, in dealing with a large data set of information, which, I mean, even The Guardian had no idea how to deal with all the information that we presented to them in the first place, from the huge logs. They got stuck on failed on sort of basic principles of how to use Excel, So the world has to change. The world of journalism has to change to take into account what we introduced and what we have in store.
I guess an obligated question is the freedom or lack of Julian Assange at the moment, being, as a refugee in the Ecuadorian embassy in the UK. How has this particular aspect, I know Julian Assange is not Wikileaks, Wikileaks is an organization with many people, but of course Julian Assange's face and image was, or I guess still is, the more visible one. Has this affected Wikileaks as an organization?
If you are referring to our operation and the way we operate, of course it has affected the organization. I mean, it's being under house arrest and then as a refugee in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, of course, affects the way we operate, and it has done so in a negative manner. But we've had to adapt to this reality. We, of course, we have been internet-based, so so being in any place doesn't really matter. We can basically work from where we are, and you can be connected to somebody on the other side of the globe working on a project, and somebody next to you is working with somebody else on a different little place on the planet. So, but Julian's position in the embassy has affected the organization somewhat, but not as much as I actually would have thought. He has big resilience. He has adapted to the situation there, and we have excellent internet connection to the embassy. So anything is possible, and it has, if somewhat, also giving him more opportunity to focus on some of the projects that we've been working on.
Is there any future possibility for Julian to actually be a free person, a free man?
Well, who is free and who is not free? I mean, are we free even though we walk about? Yeah, of course this ridiculous situation will come to an end. It is totally unacceptable that that the UK government in Britain will not honour its obligation under national laws and treaties and recognise that he is a legitimate refugee being offered asylum in Ecuador on legitimate grounds. And even the legitimacy of those grounds were exemplified by what happened with Edward Snowden, and everybody saw what kind of situation could be in store. And with reference to how Chelsea Manning was treated in the US, which had nothing to do with justice or human rights at all. So at some point there will of course be a solution in these matters, and it will come to an end. I sense among the general public in the UK, for example, a growing urgency sort of to end this situation. They don't feel that this is just in any way, and they are concerned about spending now almost $10 million on keeping the Ecuadorian embassy basically barracked off by police officers from the Metropolitan Police. It's almost the best guarded embassy in the entire London. So it will come to an end. I'm sure that will happen.
Vamos a ir a un corte y enseguida volvemos con ustedes. Continuamos con nuestra conversación con Kristinn Hrafnsson. Kristinn, how do you see, after the leaks now by Edward Manning, how do you see this reconfiguration of what is private and what is public? It's now evident that there's no privacy. And people have been shaken up by the fact that their private conversations and photos and their private life is being, spied on and used in ways that nobody can really think of currently. Has it really been a major change in the way we go about our daily lives?
Well, you were referring to Snowden. You said Manning, but it's okay.
Yes, but I'm referring to Edward.
But interesting enough, I mean, of course, they are connected. As very important whistleblower, Bradley Manning and Edward Snowden. The Snowden revelations really touched a chord with everybody because it was pertaining to our personal interest instead of being about a war in a different country. So it has been a very informative to see what kind of reaction these revelations have had, and they are explosive. What will happen? What will change? Of course, people will have to decide whether this is an acceptable thing. I mean, a lot of people don't seem to be too worried about it. They seem to be being dragged into this accepting this absurd, wrong scaling of things, where you basically give up your information on Facebook and social media, and you give away all your privacy, and at the same time where secrecy of those who are in power, whether they are government or corporate, is increasing, day by day, year by year. But I think there will be a change now when you see that this is being abused, that all the direct spying on individuals, it's so massive in scale that people are shocked and they have to take a stand. I mean, this is on a scale that is that would have would have been a dream come true for a Stasi Germany under the communist regime. And actually, I heard an interview with a former officer from the Secret Service of the communist East Germany saying, we could never have dreamt of this kind of information gathering, and they spied on everyone. So this is a shocking revelation, and accompanied with that, of course, have been all the lies and deception about the nature of these information gathering by the US government and other actually governments that have been cooperating. What will change? It's hard to see into the future, but people will both have to guard themselves against this snooping. I would think and believe that there will be a gradual change in the way we do handle information on the internet. but also, of course, it will be hopefully a strong movement in demanding that this stops, because it's unethical, it's a violation of our basic rights, it's undemocratic, it's basically an insult to all our basic values, even values that the governments who are doing this are holding out to be the highest ideals, and even believe that they are in a position to preach to other countries around the world upon those values. But we are in the midst of these things. I mean, we have not seen everything from Edward Snowden. We have seen enough, and more than anybody would have expected. For us in Wikileaks, this is somewhat very interesting, because we have been warning about this, we have been talking about this for quite some time. As the dark side of the internet, we of course are embracing the good sides of the internet, the possibilities of social and political change, but there is a flip side. It can be changed into the biggest spying tool in the world. But people needed the evidence, and Snowden provided the evidence, and we are in the midst of this. This is affecting societies, how they perceive their government. It is contributing to exposing the widening gap between those in power and those who are powerless in society. It's exposing the gap between those nations with the biggest powers and with lesser powers. It is transforming and changing the world that we live in these days, and where will it lead? It has to lead to a better world.
From Chelsea Manning to Edward Snowden, we have seen and known a lot of things done by the governments, the US and other governments, against human rights, against the values of life and justice and peace. Would you say that Wikileaks holds the human rights or the right to informate and communicate as part of its core goal or discourse?
Yes, I mean, what we believe is in transparency and in exposing information. We are information activists. Now we have, I'll admit that. People used to say that you're not journalists, you're activists. And I say, for heaven's sake, if you're not a journalist who wants to get information out, how can you be doing your job as a journalist? So every journalist has to be an information activist. He has to be fighting for the freedom of information. He has to fight for now the freedom of the internet. And he has to fight for the basic values that we combine as a civilized human being. You know, whether it's written out in the declarations of the United Nations or on human rights. I mean, there are basic elements there that we need to fight for. And any journalist who shies away from that, he is basically, in my mind, totally worthless. There is no such thing as a total neutrality. You know, the information also always has some effect, and you can play this game, which I call the sort of ping-pong game of journalism, with sort of he says, she says, and thereby you have done your duty as a journalist. It's not that easy. That's the easy way out. That is basically contributing to the status quo. It is like an American journalist coming to the concentration camp after the World War II and deciding that he should not just talk to the remaining survivors of the concentration camp, but well, we also have to give equal time to the chief of the concentration camp. You know, we have to be fair and balanced. You know, it's stupidity. So I hope I answered the question. I mean, there are ground values, core values that we fight for.
Yeah. There has to be a statement, a political stance of journalists in engaging the topics or the themes that they report on. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying if you are a proper journalist, you gather information and you have a right to draw the line and draw a conclusion from the information that you gather, and you should not shy away from that conclusion. And if you get to a conclusion this is unjust, I mean, you should push forward with all the tools of journalism to seek justice. I mean, that's what I see, and I've always seen as a part of journalism. Many of my colleagues do not agree. But when I was working on the collateral murder video, and I felt that, you know, I have to go to Baghdad, I have to find out who these people are, what happened there. I knew the two journalists who were killed, their name and their story, Namir Nur el-Din, a brilliant photojournalist, and his assistant, Said Sma. But who were these children? What were they doing there? I mean, was it their father in the car? So I went there before we released that and found out. And a part of it, of course, was that there needed to be some justice for the victims. And I met those children and who were fatherless, and I thought, well, at least I've done a bit of my part in helping exposing their story, why their father was killed simply because he was passing by on driving them to a little religious course, and he helped a wounded man. There is a justice in knowing. Of course, I would like to see a justice in bringing those to account who actually took part in the killing. But if we would start that process in Iraq, you would end up, of course, in the White House. There's where the real accountability should be for those war crimes. I mean, the collateral murder video, it's horrible to watch, and I've seen it, you know, hundreds of times when I was working on editing it with my colleagues and analyzing the dialogue and deciphering the dialogue between the pilots, this callousness of bloodlust that came through, you know, that, you know, it was like a video game, as has been mentioned. It still has an effect on me to see those images, but it was far from being a singular event. It was almost a daily occurrence, and that's what we brought to light in the Iraq war logs. This was not happening. This was not just a one-off incident. This was not just the one napalm girl in Vietnam. This was happening on a daily basis. Innocent people were being slaughtered, and it was called collateral damage, which it's an English word that it's like a little dent in the car, you know. Yeah. It is a horrible label. Therefore, with a play of words, it became collateral murder as a title on the video by Wikileaks. So, yes, it is my opinion that journalists should fight against injustice, fight for justice.
I find fascinating that you say there is justice in knowing. I guess there's always been this huge fight for information as a source of power. But I guess in the world today, this is more evident than never before, because we have now several different instruments and tools online everywhere in the world simultaneously to actually access information and to actually exercise power through that information. How can the regular citizen exercise that power using the tools at hand and the information that we can be in touch with?
Well, to start with, I mean, the role of journalists as being a witness has always been one of extremely important one. Just to be there to bear witness to atrocities. There is not a possibility to intervene, but that somebody has to bear witness and register and keep account of what's happening. This has often been the horribly sad reality for war correspondents, but they do a tremendously important job that to gather the information, so it's at least it's there, it's on record. That is what happened. This is history. This is part of of the injustice that possibly is possible to later to bring to an end with accountability. So it is. I've always seen it as a very important role, and it's ongoing. It's ongoing in Syria at this moment, where people are exposing themselves to real dangers and being very brave. The normal citizen, there is an opportunity, of course, to gather information and to submit it on the same sort of basis. When we see injustice, when we see evidence of wrongdoing, we can use our tools, basically the phone in our pocket as individuals to monitor and to get it onward. Some mainstream media actually are starting to rely quite a bit on these kind of action by citizens, and of course there is the room for abuse, where we've seen this sort of technique being abused and in the disinformation process. So we have the possibility of individuals taking direct part in that information gathering. Yes.
Can people contribute to the Wikileaks website? Can you still upload information?
No, we're not open for submissions for the simple reason that originally in 2010 the platform was sabotaged and it had to be worked on from scratch. But at the same time, of course, in the endless race of creating an absolute security, which of course is maybe an utopian ideal, but there is the strong commitment that Wikileaks provides the 100% proof security for those who submit. It would have been a huge task. At the same time, basically, we were under great pressure in working with the material we were already in our hands. Our ability to actually expand was limited greatly because of the banking blockade. We could not grow in the manner that we had planned and foreseen, and we had to spend our limited resources on defense, against the banking blockades, against the legal challenges. So it is not possible now through that process, but there are always ways and means. So information has a tendency to get to our sort of in our possession.
What are the main tasks that Wikileaks faces currently? What are you working on doing? I know one of the things is supporting Bradley Manning and Chelsea Manning nowadays. I'm sorry, and the fact that still facing a very ridiculous and long conviction.
Yes, I mean we do our best to support Chelsea Manning, and as is pretty well known, we are now helping Edward Snowden, who is stranded in Russia, and interestingly enough, it was because of what the U.S. government did by taking his passport away or invalidating it, that he ended up in Moscow. He couldn't go forward, which is quite ironic because he is being blamed by so many politicians in the U.S. as seeking shelter from Putin, but that was never the intention. It's absolutely their own fault that he's there. So we are spending our resources on assisting him somewhat. We are still, of course, doing the legal fights and going on the offense against the economic and financial powers that hit us in 2010. It took us 3 years to get a victory in the first Supreme Court case in my home country in Iceland, and we are now going on the offensive because in the end we want them to pay us damages for the damage that they've done, and to make sure that this never happens again, that you are have the biggest financial powers teaming up in the world on a political basis to silence or attempt to silence an organization in the way they did or attempted to do. But there are also other challenges and new projects ahead. We have been publishing constantly projects that have possibly gone a little bit below radar for many individuals. It's not in the same scope or magnitude as the one in the beginning, but they are important and they are there. One was, for example, earlier this year, the release of or diplomatic cables that were 40 years old to make it very accessible and easily searchable, called the Kissinger cable. It's from the era of Secretary of State Henry Kissinger in a very interesting era in the early 70s, 1970s, where you had, of course, the coup d'état in Chile, the very important phase in Latin American history. So it was one of the projects that we've been going through. We have, of course, projects that we're working on, but as a general policy, I've never discussed that.
Evidently, I know that. Vamos a ir a un corte y enseguida regresamos. Continuamos aquí en Diálogos con la Realidad en nuestra conversación con Kristinn Hrafnsson, el vocero de Wikileaks. Kristinn, there's one question that I know somebody asked you elsewhere. Do you see harshening of the control of governments over information, mainly online on the web, as a consequence of the leaks that Wikileaks has actually shown to the world after the Manning files and now with Edward Snowden?
Well, we've seen some attempts to sort of strengthen the control around the information, but it is not a major change, I think. There are so many people that have access to secret information. You also have to understand that there is an absurd escalation of classification of secret information in society, and especially in the United States. It has tenfolded. I think there are now 80 million documents a year that are classified as secret in the U.S. by the government. And it's up from a few million 10 years ago, so it's exponentially growing. So who's going to have access to this information? Who is you have basically a bigger and bigger group of people who have this access. It is will not affect, I believe, in a negative way, leaks to the general public. People will get more out of this secret information because of the courage is contagious, as we say, and there are going to be more whistleblowers and leakers who are part of this privileged underclass of those who have access to it in their work. So it has not had any negative effect in that manner.
Do you think that the actual consequences that Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden are leaving for being whistleblowers would actually kind of cause fear in people who might be willing to do it, but then nowadays are more cautious and thinking it twice?
The war on whistleblowers has been going on for a long time, and it didn't start with the absurd treatment of Chelsea Manning and the absurd manhunt against of Edward Snowden. It has been going on for years, and regrettably under President Obama it has been escalating, and now they are using, of course, the espionage laws, basically laws of treason, to try to go after whistleblowers, and more whistleblowers have been charged on the basis of these archaic espionage laws under Obama than under all other presidents in the United States combined. It is absurd, but it is not stopping people. It did not stop Edward Snowden to see that Chelsea Manning was placed in isolation in a cell, which is a form of torture, for almost a year. He took this decisive step, and he even came forward and recognized and exposed himself after doing that. Extraordinarily brave and courageous and individual. There will be others coming forth. I'm absolutely certain of that. I think there are going to be, I think I said earlier today, that there might be more than one. There would be an Edward Snowden or Chelsea Manning in 2014, and maybe more than one, maybe 5, maybe 10. That's what I see is happening, an escalation of this, because it is very much needed in our times, and it is contagious. And those corrupt elements that are in power they know this. That's why they are so afraid. They are afraid to lose their position and power. That's the only logical explanation of the absurd overreach that they've gone through. For example, now in the last few months against Edward Snowden, to threaten nation, to force down the aeroplane of a president of an independent country, violating international laws. This extreme reaction is the reaction of power that know that they can be hurt badly, and that is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. And I guess part of this fear that you're talking about from the people in power is it's actually demonstrated in the fact that they are using the discourse of national security to mask the espionage and to mask all the things that they are doing. Would you say that there's a relationship there?
Yeah, of course it is, and it has a hollow tone. You cannot bluff people. You cannot cry wolf over and over again and get away with it. I mean, it's just it is a hollow claim that they've been saying that we were putting lives at risk at WikiLeaks, that Edward Snowden is putting lives at risk. He is risking national security, but people are asking, but it's only information to people about spying on themselves. How can that risk? I mean, that's absurd. So it is being almost laughable, and nobody takes it seriously anymore because they don't have any argument. So what do they revert to? Propaganda, which they have very easy access to get through the media, and even in the academia. I had to laugh when I saw a course being offered at Harvard Business School, and the title was the challenges to United States national security, Syria, Iran, and WikiLeaks. It's absurd. And we see that flowing into the media, into all kinds of absurd reports, bad documentaries, and even into Hollywood films, like it's now being released in a short time. Yeah. But the arguments are not there, and people are seeing that. They are coming to terms with that and understanding that this is not making them more secure.
The Fifth State is the name of the film that is going to be released, and that Hollywood actually produced to have the inside story about WikiLeaks, which is evidently a very propagandistic discourse. At the time, a few months back, Julian Assange made a statement about it, saying that it was more an official vision and a way to undermine the image and the work of WikiLeaks. How do you see it?
It is an absurd film, and I haven't seen it. I've read the script. It was leaked to us, the script of the film. And the most serious element there is taking the propaganda points from the State Department, the White House, and the Pentagon, and creating a subplot, which is an absolute fantasy creation about how we supposedly endangers lives. And the serious issue here is that this will influence public opinion. It will could seriously affect the chances that Chelsea Manning has in a retrial and in his attempt to get pardon. So it is affecting individuals whose interests are very much at stake. And this is, of course, affecting us at Wikileaks. It's affecting Julian Assange. There is an ongoing criminal investigation. If you are affecting public, the public with this, it's not just artistic license about something that happened in the past. It's an ongoing story. That's the seriousness there. Apart from the fact that it seems to be a rather boring film, which is very astonishing when giving a fact that it's a very exciting story. It is very factually incorrect, and it's very shallow. It doesn't understand the journalism. The title itself is an insult. You know, what with the fifth estate is. I've taken all my years as a journalist. I've been debating about this element of the fourth estate. You know, but the fifth estate is sort of suggesting that this is not journalism. It's something new, totally apart. So, in many ways, it seems to be a very bad film, but the critic seems to agree that it's also a rather uninteresting one, so maybe it's not going to hurt anything in the long run, I hope.
Let's hope for that. But I guess it's very indicative of how not only the mainstream media, but the mainstream industries, such as Hollywood, are buying into this official discourse and into this way of preserving the status quo no matter what. Yeah. And using information or misinformation, in this case, presented as a fiction film, to evidently influence the public opinion and to present a side of Wikileaks that people who might not know already what Wikileaks is and what it stands for will fall into it. Is there a danger there?
Well, it's very important for people to realize that Hollywood is an industry. It's a machine, and I have to get that through here. And there's a strong connection, and they have power. They are powerful in many ways in influencing not only the way people see their environment, but also influencing government policy. One of the things that we were exposing in the embassy cables was how the copyright mafia, as I call it, which has its base in Hollywood, were able to push through the State Department in the United States, in Washington, a direct policy in attacking the Pirate Bay file sharing sites in Sweden. So what they did is that they dictated how the State Department was putting a pressure with threat of economic sanctions on the Swedish government, who in turn changed the laws and prosecuted a few individuals who were in their early teens, imprisoned them, and sentenced them into paying, you know, a ridiculous amount of money. This was basically Hollywood getting people in Sweden in prison for sharing files. So it's not just an innocent practice of creating entertainment. It is both creating disinformation and creating atmosphere and creating the mindset of the public, but also directly, in a very cold-blooded manner, directing foreign policy. This is a huge industry, and it's powerful. And so we have to put this all in context. In the same manner as we saw politicians in Washington calling up Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, and said, you know, go after them. You know, everybody said credit cards, they are apolitical. They don't care what you do with your credit card. But in the end, they bowed to political pressure and maybe formulated the pressure somewhat through the revolving door. We have revealed a lot about how things have been working in this world where the elites and the cores of power are combined, and usually and generally against the interest of the general public.
I know that you consider yourself an optimistic.
Hello.
What can you say as a final remark on an optimistic note about WikiLeaks and the world today after WikiLeaks?
Well, I can tell you that I was getting rather depressed after spending more than 2 decades in mainstream media and journalism. But when WikiLeaks came about, I was absolutely thrilled. It was I saw this as basically a step in a new revolution, and I believe that we will look back at these times and say, well, this is a watershed, and I have to be optimistic. It's my duty because I have children. If I want to see them, live in a world that is better than the one that I lived in, and at least not worse. So that's what drives me and drives my optimism, and because I've seen the positive elements of what we have been doing and what our ideals have contributed in the world. So yes, hopeless optimist, but I think we're sliding into hopefully a better place. It can be a bumpy road, and it can be a regression and sort of pendulum swing, but let's hope we'll get there in a better place where we have more justice, more empowerment of the general public, and a sort of a healthier and more robust democratic society.
With that positive note, we have to say goodbye. Kristinn, thank you very much for giving us your time, and hopefully we'll have you around here some other time soon.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Muchísimas gracias a ustedes, sobre todo por acompañarnos aquí en Diálogos con la Realidad. Hasta pronto.